So today we're going to talk about relative modes. Now this is the first of a sort of two-part series. So next month's live lesson is going to cover a lot of concepts that build upon this month's. And so make sure you kind of check them both out. And in addition to that, on Rock Class 101, there's a PDF download for today's lesson as well as next month's lesson. I think that they're very important to have available because we'll be talking about them. But if you don't have them, it's not the end of the world. You should be able to follow along. But let's go and talk about this word relative. So this week is all about relative. Next week's about parallel. Crazy words, right? Well, what relative means in the spec of music, right, is keys that share the same collection of notes. So what we're going to start with is C major, also known as the people's key. And why are we playing in C major to start? Well, C major is the, I think, objectively easiest key to play in, because there are no sharps or flats to any of the notes. It's just the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back to C. Makes it really easy for this sort of exercise. Let's go and learn how to play our C major scale, if you haven't played it already. Go and grab your ukulele. Doesn't matter if it's high G or low G, tenor, soprano, concert, doesn't matter. C major scale is played the same way on all of these. We're going to start by plucking our C string open, which is our C note. And then we're going to play the second fret of the C string. I like to use my middle finger here. And then open on the E string, and then 1 on the E string with our index, 3 on our E with our ring, open on the A, 2 on the A with the middle, and 3 on the A with the ring. You'll notice this is the first thing listed on that PDF download that I mentioned. So that is a C major scale, and the notes here are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The C note is sort of bookending it all, right? And that's why we call it a C major scale, is because it starts and ends on a C note and has these exact collection of notes in it. It has C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back to C. So if we take that at the value of that is C major, it's pretty cool, because now let's say that somebody's playing a song in C major and they say, hey, take a solo or something, right? It's like, oh, what notes do I play? Well, I can play my C major scale because those are the notes in the key, and those are what give it its sort of identity, right? Now, the reason why relative modes are so critical on the ukulele is because, especially if you're playing with a high G like I do, we're very limited in our range of the instrument. If I'm always starting on the C string for a scale to make sure that it traverses equally laterally this way, then that means if I want to solo in the key of like B major, for instance, I have to go all the way up here. And that's just awful, right? That's just dreadful. And using what are called relative modes can really help unwind that. So let's break that down a little bit. So relative means to share the same notes, right? So if we're in the key of C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, does anyone know any relative modes or scales or keys to the key of C major? Well, if you studied music theory before, you might know that C major and A minor are relative to one another. You might have heard that before, and you may know what that means, you might not, but most people have heard that when they've studied music, like C major, A minor, they're the same thing. But obviously they're not the same thing, because one thing's called C major and one thing's called A minor. So what does that really mean? Well, all that it actually means is that they share the same collection of notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C is C major. And it's C major because of those notes and the order in which those notes are played, starting on a C and ending on a C. So if I were to start on an A note and end on an A note, but play the same notes as C major, that would be called an A minor scale. And if you look at the PDF, you actually have to go all the way second to the bottom. I know it seems random. Why is it in this order? But it'll make sense soon, I promise. If you look at measure 11 on that PDF, you'll see it says A minor. Now that A minor scale starts here with an A note, and then it goes to a B, C, D, E, F, G, and A. So it starts and ends on an A. However, the notes that are contained are still the same C, D, E, F, G, A, B. It's the same exact notes, just with a different order. And when you listen to that, it sounds very minor. It sounds very sad. Isn't that cool? It's the same notes, just a different organization to create a different sound. So those are relative to one another because they share the same collection of notes. But here's the thing. If I wanted to solo in the key of A minor, do I have to play my A minor scale? No, I don't. I don't have to play my A minor scale. What I have to do is I have to play something that sounds like an A minor scale. So if I played my C major scale down here, and in a very simplistic way, I focus on the A note, I can make this C major scale sound minor by kind of focusing on that note. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a C major scale up and down, but what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to go all the way up, and then as I'm coming back down, I'm going to not go all the way down. I'll go to maybe like this G note, and then I'll come back up to the A. And you'll notice all of a sudden the scale sounds minor, something like this. Hey, we're in A minor just like that because our perspective has changed. Because C major and A minor, they have the exact same notes. So the only thing that dictates how we perceive it, how we hear that key, is the perspective. And the easiest perspective is starting and ending on the note. So that's how we create these scales. But if I end on the note in a different way, like my A note here on the open A string with my C scale, I can actually make it sound like A minor relatively easy. It's kind of neat, right? And so if I'm soloing with somebody and we're playing in the key of A minor, do you really think that I'm going to just go like this the whole time? You know, and be soloing up here. I mean, I can, but that's a really small area, right? When you watch professional players, do they just solo in one little scale? No, right? They do the whole neck. How do they know what to do with that whole neck? Relative modes, or at least that's how I teach it and how I know it. So if I'm soloing in the key of A minor, I'm going to actually play my C major chord down here. My C major scale, excuse me, not chord. My C major scale right here. And I can focus on that A note to make it that sort of sound. Now, a text chat says, is that true for chords too? And it is not, because a chord is a collection of 3 notes or more stacked together to create a sound. A scale is a collection of multiple notes to create more of a world. The scale is not played at the same time. Not all of the notes are played simultaneously to create a certain sound. It's the way that those notes interact with each other in sequential orders that creates this sort of sound. So a chord and a scale, very, very different. However, you can create the sound based on the chord. So what that means is if I'm playing a C major chord in the key of C major, there are 3 notes to that chord. Those notes are C, E, and G. So if I play my C major scale and I focus on those notes, you can hear that sort of come through. The notes of the chord can help create that sound. If I switch to an A minor chord, however, those notes are A, C, and E. So if I do that same little exercise, I go, I can create that sound of a minor chord using that same C major scale, because now I'm focusing on the notes of an A minor chord to create that vibe. And it works out really well because C major, A minor are relative modes to one another. Both of the keys share the same collection of notes. It's just the organization that they're shown, and we can play with that expectation based on how we sort of focus on the notes. And this is one of the biggest tools us ukulele players have because of the limitation of our instrument. So now, that's C major and C minor, or excuse me, A minor. Geez, C major, A minor. Share the same collection of notes. Most common 2 keys we really see out there to talk about this exercise. But that's not all of it. And if you were to define these in their modes, and all that modes is a fancy word for scale, then that is C major, also known as Ionian, C Ionian, and A minor, also known as A Aeolian, which is minor. It's the same thing. Ionian is major, Aeolian is minor. It's synonymous for all intents and purposes here. So let's think about that for a minute. We have a scale starting on a C, and we have a scale starting on an A that both use the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, no sharps or flats. Well, that's the C, and that's the A. What about the D, E, F, G, and B? Those are all notes in the scale, right? What if I were to start on one of those notes? Now, I'm still thinking C major. I'm not thinking anything complicated. I'm still C, D, E, F, G, A, B. But what if I started on a different note? What if I started on a D note instead? So instead of starting on the C, the first note, I'm starting on a D, the second note. Well, if I do that, if you look at the sheet, that's measure 3, D Dorian, which is a crazy name. Makes for a great video game character name, by the way, Dorian. I digress. When you play a D Dorian scale, it creates a unique sound. It creates what's called a Dorian sound. And that's very jazzy, very interesting. It sounds something like this. You can hear it's a really nice sound. It's very commonly used in a lot of different types of music, but like Carlos Santana loves that sort of sound. It's really, really cool. That's a Dorian. That's great. That's awesome. But let's not think of it as Dorian for the moment. Let's just think of it as relative to C major, because D Dorian and C major are the exact same collection of notes. There's no difference in terms of the notes that are played. The only difference is the starting and ending point in which they're played. By starting on a D and ending on a D, I am playing a D Dorian, and that has a very different sound than C major because of that starting and ending point. However, if I focused on that C note, where is that C note? It's right here. I can make it sound like C major by using this as sort of my position, my sort of sense of home. And now, if I solo a little bit in D Dorian, it might sound something like this. You can hear that. I can make that sound very C major-y just by focusing on the C note. Such a basic way of doing that, but hey, it sounds like C. And why is this important? Well, if I were soloing or I was doing a melody, maybe I was doing a chord melody arrangement or something, and this C note is a really important one, well, that's great. I can play my C major scale. But what if this D note to this C note, to this B note, to this C note was a really important little motif in it? Well, that C major scale doesn't really work very well unless I kind of break it. However, the D Dorian scale might work really well because it lets me have that C note and lets me have the D note above it. And that's a really powerful little tool. So there are multiple times where when I'm soloing in the key of C major, I'm going to play something around with a D Dorian scale because maybe I want that relationship of that D to that C, right? And now I can be in a different zone. And when you watch really good soloists, they're not just playing down here. They're playing in other places too because they know these other modes. So that's D Dorian. That's great. Now we've started with C, we've started with D. What about E? Well, that creates something called E Phrygian. And that's what it sounds like. Ooh, cool Spanish type of sound, right? You know. You can hear that really, Malagueña type of sound, right? Well, same deal. This sound is created by playing the same notes of C major, starting and ending on an E note. That's it. By starting and ending on an E note, no sharps or flats, it creates a Phrygian mode, and that is a really cool, interesting sound. So maybe you like that sound, you're just going to sit there and practice it for a while, and that's great. I love Phrygian. It's just such a rich sound. Such a cool vibe, right? Now, this being said, Phrygian sounds really unique, right? Why does it sound so unique? Well, I mean, if you focus on that E note, that E going to the F, that's a really nice sound. And maybe while I'm practicing, I discover, I really like that sound. Well, I could do that same sound with my D Dorian or with my C major because it's the same notes. And now if I go to my D Dorian, I get that D below it, right? And that's kind of cool, isn't it? Right? Like now this E note can go up to the F and then go down to the D. And now I actually like my D Dorian scale for an E Phrygian sound more. Isn't that weird? It's crazy. But all that it is knowing, hey, these are the same notes. And depending on how I want to kind of approach into it, I can do different things. And this might be overwhelming, right? This might be, oh my God, there's so many things to work on. This is so much. And if you're feeling that way, just play the scale and then look at another scale and try to make one scale sound like the other. Play your C major scale, right? And then play your D Dorian scale. Maybe that's enough for a week, right? But then once you play them both, be like, oh, I'm going to make D Dorian sound like C major. Easiest way to do that is just focus on the C note, right? And then maybe I'll be like, oh, I'm going to play my C major scale, make it sound like E Phrygian. Easiest way to do that is kind of focus on your E note, right? Really simple ways of doing it. Not easy, but simple, right? Simple just means it's, easily understood. Doesn't mean it's easy to do. And that practice is what's so critical with this. So then from here, we've got our E Phrygian. We also have the next one, which is F Lydian. And so it got this really cool sci-fi type of vibe to it. In our next lesson, we're going to be talking a lot about what makes these scales unique. That's going to be talking about the parallel, and we'll talk more about that next time. Right now is relative. It's just all the same notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's all. That's the only notes we're playing with, nothing else. But F Lydian is a pretty cool sound. But I like F Lydian for soloing in C because I can kind of do these little... I can approach this C note now here on the 8th fret of the E string, and it's a totally different zone. Right? The next one's G Mixolydian. My favorite, truly my favorite. And the reason for that is because the C is like right in the middle. And you can hear it, it's really easy to make it sound like C major because of the organization of the scale. Right? Really cool. Now, if somebody's playing in C major, I'm going to be soloing up here a lot, right? Because I like it. I might be soloing here, here, here. I'm playing my C major. I'm playing my D Dorian, right? I'm playing my E Phrygian. I'm playing my F Lydian. I'm playing my G Mixolydian, right? Next one's A Aeolian, also known as A minor, one we already learned. Stock minor sound, really nice sound. And then the last one, B Lydian. So I'll tell you right now, this scale, it's terrible. It sounds awful. Lydian is a terrible key. It just doesn't sound good. It's unresolved. We're going to talk more about that in our next session, why it just doesn't sound good. But B Lydian, just for context, sounds something like this. Isn't that dreadful? Nothing there. But if I want to go way up on the neck, I can do that with this B Lydian. This can give me other unique options. So all that I do with this exercise is I learn these notes kind of everywhere on the fretboard. And fascinatingly enough, if you were to look at each one of these scales, and this is my favorite part of this whole lesson, by the way, if you were to look at that PDF and you were to just look at the first note of each scale and you go down, it is the scale that's shown laterally. So what I mean by that is you look at measure 1, first note C. And then you look at measure 3, which is starting the D Dorian scale. It's this. And then you look at measure, we just did 3, measure 5. And then measure 7, measure 9, measure 11, measure 13. Those are C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Those are the notes all up and down the C string. If you go to the E string, same thing. You can actually look at how these all will work. And no matter where you start, if you go straight down, it does that. So if you start on the 2, it's going to go from the 2 to the 4 to the 5 to the 7 to the 9 to 11 to the 12. It just kind of continues. It's a fascinating little exercise to see how these notes can traverse both laterally and horizontally. It's really, or is that the same thing? Laterally, you get what I mean. It's finding those notes going both this way on the fretboard as well as going up and down this way. And man, is it ever cool. So I know this is a lot of information. This is a big lesson, and this is really intended for people that have started to look at modes and try to break them down before. If this is all new to you and you feel very overwhelmed, you're not alone. I felt equally overwhelmed when I was learning this stuff. Just try to make one relationship at a time. And I think the best one that you can make right now is play C major, play D Dorian. Name the notes as you're playing them. Name C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then name D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. And realize these are the same notes, just starting and ending at a different point. It's exactly the same. And the only thing that creates the sound of each one is that starting and ending point. So if you play with that expectation and focus on a different note, you can completely change the identity of the key. And if you're really interested in becoming a great soloist on the ukulele, you have to know all of these modes, Not necessarily because you need to know your Dorian mode to solo with it, although it is a good thing to know, no question, but because you have to know how many different places you can play the same collection of notes moving up and down the fretboard. At the very beginning of the lesson, and this is a little bit more for advanced people that are understanding everything so far, so it's okay if this doesn't make total sense at first, but I mentioned soloing in the key of B major is terrible on an ukulele, a high G ukulele, because if I want to play a B major scale, I'm all the way up here. It's just awful, right? Well, using this concept, B, the next note's C sharp in a B major scale, which means it goes from B major to C sharp Dorian. And if I know how to play a C sharp Dorian scale, I can solo in B using it. And why is that important? Why is that good? Well, because my C sharp note's right here. And holy smokes, is it so much easier now to play with that C sharp Dorian scale than it is to play with my B major scale. B major's all the way up here, C sharp Dorian's right here. And now if I'm soloing in, I can actually create the sound of B major using my C sharp Dorian so much nicer. It's just so much easier because of that. And that's the big trick to this whole exercise, is making sure that you can find these scales across the necks and these key structures so that you can unlock it based on the notes that are played, not necessarily just the order that they're played in. Now that, I know, very advanced, but next week, or next month rather, we're going to be working on parallel modes. And just to give kind of a quick overview, parallel is not sharing the same notes. So today we worked on C major and all of the relative modes to C major, all of the other keys that share the same notes as C major, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, and B Locrian. Next time, we're going to work on C major and the parallel Dorian to C major. Parallel sounds scary, it's so easy. Parallel just means the same starting and ending point. So we're going to work on C major, and then we're going to work on C Dorian, and then C Phrygian, and then C Lydian, C Mixolydian, C Aeolian, C Locrian. And the reason for this is it shows us how to create these scales more in a vacuum. So it's more of a practice on the modes themselves rather than how they can be used in different ways. So right now, our goal is we're playing in C major this whole way, and we can use all 7 of these modes to do that. It's kind of neat. So this is a lot. I totally understand that this is a lot. It's a lot to pack in to 25 minutes on a Saturday morning. But again, try to take away one thing and then maybe watch this video again and see if you can take away another thing, because I guarantee you, as things unlock, more things unravel, and that's a good thing because you start to see what is taking place and how all this theory connects to create these sounds. I'm going to open it up to any questions. I'm going to start reading through the chat too, just to see if there's any questions that haven't been answered. So Pcash says, hello from Grove City, Ohio today. Awesome. Greetings from Seattle, Washington over here. Zill said, what about like D Dorian? I think that was a question when I was mentioning the minor. And so, yep, Dorian's another one of these modes. And then Pcash says, is there a pentatonic scale for each of these modes? Fantastic question. So a pentatonic scale, to break down for one moment. Pent means 5, right? Like pentagon, 5-sided. So a pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale. And a pentatonic scale in relation to major omits the 4th and the 7th of the scale. So if we're in C major and we play, if we omit the 4th, that's going to be the F, and the 7th is the B. So if I play the notes of C major without the F and B, it's C, D, E, G, A, B. Or A, D, or A, C, excuse me, not B, A, C. C, D, E, G, A, B. C, why do I keep saying that? You know what I mean. It's that C note, right? The reason that pentatonic scales exist is because they create no tension. The notes that have tension are called leading tones. Leading tones resolve by half step. The 4 to the 3 is a half step, and the 7 to the 1 is a half step. So by omitting those notes, sounds more natural, or rather more simple. And so a pentatonic version of each one of these scales does exist, and this actually is something I need to refresh my memory on with scales. But essentially what would happen is you would play those same notes. You'd play the same C, D, E, G, A, back to the C. So you would actually omit your F Lydian and your B Locrian entirely, because you can't start on those notes. And so you could play your C, D, E, G, A, C, And then you go to the next one, and that would be D, E, G, A, C, D, right? And then you go to the next one, it'd be E, G, A, C, D, E, right? Skip the F flat idiom because we're not playing that note. Go to the G, G, A, C, D, E, G. And these are really nice to learn, but it's basically just the same pentatonic scale repeated, starting and ending on different notes. But it is helpful because that gives you opportunity for those, rock licks and everything else, which, I mean, you are watching this on Rock Class 101, so it does make sense to work with. But I find that even though they are simpler scales, it's easier to learn those afterwards, after you've learned this concept, because it's taking away from, and it's much easier to take away from than it is to add to, if that makes sense. So if you learn those first, it's like, oh, why am I playing these other notes? So, but yes, you can use it. It's just they don't each have names in the same way. Cash also says very interesting, which is great. And so Zil says, I get the basics, but I'm not sure I fully get how to use them. Yeah, that's totally normal. And one of the biggest problems about learning music is applicational stuff versus, theoretical stuff. So like, how much of what you're learning can you immediately use, and how much of what you use do you need to learn? And that relationship is very skewed. If you're just learning tabs and playing through really difficult song arrangements, your playing can get all the way up here, right? You can be playing the While My Guitar Gently Weeps by Jake Shimabukuro or whatever, play it really well. Like, man, you're a great player. But you might not know that you're in the key of C minor and C major while you play it, and not know those chord names. So your understanding might be down here. That's okay. That doesn't matter. If you're loving this, you don't have to know this. If you want to be the best you can be, yeah, but you don't have to be the best you can be. I know that sounds weird coming from a teacher, but be the most fun you can be with it. Get the most enjoyment you can. For most people, learning some theory helps them have more enjoyment, but for some people, theory can be stressful and anxiety ridden, and in which case, don't worry about it. It's okay. Just play. You can still make progress just playing. And so I totally get the, it's like, when am I going to use this G Mixolydian? And learning it a little bit now, getting your feet wet with it, it's very important for if you ever get to the point where you need it, you'll have it, if that makes sense. And so a lot of times when I was learning music theory in college, I'd be like, I don't know what this is for. So, all right, but I'll listen. And then a year or 2 or 3 later, I'd be playing the uke and be like, oh, I need something in that. Oh my God, that's a Phrygian. And I'd go back to the music theory and be like, oh, that's that. Yes. And it took years before they all connected, right? And so usually people that need to know this know why they need to know this. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. It's totally fine. I hate scales. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. Scales are not my forte, pun intended. I'm not a big fan. I like playing melodies more than scales. But for some people, scales can be the best way to identify with it. And it's an important lesson to have out there, and one that you can come revisit as you get more of an understanding of why you might need these scales. If you're starting to play a lot of jazz music and solo with it, that Dorian scale is going to be your best friend. But we'll have more about that in our parallel lesson next week. Zil says, I'm all about the fun. That's what I'm all about too. It's absolutely the most important part of playing a musical instrument as an adult. If you're watching this as somebody who does the ukulele to unwind from the stress of their everyday life, which I think is most of you, I hope it's most of you, then don't ever feel obligated to do something out of whatever just the obligation is. Enjoy yourself and find things that are challenging, that push yourself to have more fun. That's what it's all about, right? Don't wear yourself out. Just get excited, and whatever makes you excited, explore that. But anyways, not to get too much of a ukulele therapy with the end of this session here. Pcash said, where's the PDF? If you go to Rock Class 101 in the forums, it's going to be there in the live lesson post. If you're watching this as a recording, that will be posted down in the link below. And so that PDF is well worth checking out and playing through to get comfortable with some of these scales. Well, thank you so much for coming this Saturday morning. I'll look forward to seeing you guys next month, where we will be talking about parallel modes, which is a fun, second half to this lesson. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next month for that new lesson. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.